This week, when do the virtues of Freemasonry bleed into the rest of our lives? This week, we'll read a great piece by Worshipful Brother Darren A. Laners when he talks about just such an instance and the inspiration from which his actions were born. Then, we'll read about the science of the earliest humans on Earth. In our Fellowcraft lecture, we learn about how the orders in architecture may be traced when the rigor of seasons obliged men to contrive shelters from the inclemencies of the weather. But what else do we know about those earliest species of humans and how long we've been here? All this and more. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry. Here's your host, Brother Robert Johnson.
Welcome back to the show. This is episode number 652. I want to thank all of our supporters, our contributors, fellows, producers, and legacy partners. If you are curious on how you can help support the WCY podcast, head on over to our website at wcypodcast.com. Click on support the show and check out the various options. If you'd just like to help out, perhaps consider getting the all-new redesigned producer's pin. This happened because of the great work from Masonic Revival. If you're not sure who Masonic Revival is, well, you might have been living under a rock. Masonic Revival is pretty much the only place around that is doing contemporary new designs for things like Masonic ties and pocket squares, aprons, all of these great and wonderful things. And they do custom work as well, and they've been doing my pins for this show, the producer's pin. They've been making it for the last 3 runs, and they have done a fantastic job with the design and the production and packaging. So if I were you, I would definitely check out MasonicRevival.com. Check out the various things they've got as far as their offerings, and also I highly recommend getting on their email list for something that they call the Abridged Journal. It's a really neat little once-in-a-while email that comes out, lets you know about sales that they're having and all of those kinds of things. It's not like every day or every week. It's not overkill, so definitely a cool little email to get and let you know when new things are coming out or when there's a sale happening. So once again, big shout out to Masonic Revival, and thanks to everyone out there who's considered buying a producer's pin, or maybe you already got one. Thank you to you as well. As far as presentations go, I know I said I didn't have anything happening. However, it looks like I will be presenting at Grand Lodge Annual Communications during the Illinois Lodge of Research. I should have my topic nailed down here and announced by next week. Looking forward to sharing that with everybody and getting all that stuff squared away. So huge thanks goes out to the Illinois Lodge of Research for having me do a presentation. I always feel honored to be able to contribute to the work of the Illinois Lodge of Research. As you may or may not know, I'm the longtime webmaster, and I'm actually in the progressive line there now. So this is really exciting for me. We've got great leadership there, and yeah, can't say enough great stuff about the Illinois Lodge of Research. If you are curious about Illinois Lodge of Research, you can certainly head on over to IllinoisLodgeofResearch.com or .org. You'll end up there at the same place, and you can fill out your membership information there and pay your fee for the membership, and you should be good to go. We've got lots of great things online. It's a lot of self-service. We keep all the transactions and everything else there for you as well. So the first piece for this week is an awesome new piece by Brother Darren A. Laners. And I really enjoyed this piece, not only because it comes from the heart, but because it touches on something that I don't think we talk about enough, which is the tangential relationship between the rest of the world and how kindness and charity and being a decent person squares up with ideals that are already in our fraternity. So let's get into that right now. You gotta buy the ticket, man. By Midnight Freemason contributor Worshipful Brother Darren A. Laners. On August 23rd, I celebrated the 4th anniversary of my first date with my wife, Lisa Goodpastor Laners. Little did I know I would join another secret society when I started my relationship with her. While the exact qualifications for labeling a group a secret society are disputed, definitions generally rely on the degree to which the organization insists on secrecy. Might involve the retention and transmission of secret knowledge, the potential for denial of membership to those who seek it, denial of knowledge of the group, the creation of personal bonds between members of the organization, and the use of secret rites or rituals which solidify members of the group, a belief in charity towards members of their organization and others, and membership which treats each other as equals, even though their membership is made up of men and women of every religious, economic, and ethnic background. When I met her, I was already a Freemason and Oddfellow. However, I would become a member of a small elite group of amazing individuals, all of whom are fans of the band Pearl Jam. Collectively, Pearl Jam fans are known as 10 Clubbers, Jamily, or Jammers. It depends on who you talk to. While many dislike the term Jamily, I have found it to be fitting because the group that has taken me in are both fans and family, brothers and sisters from another mother. In any case, I have found that there is a community that shares a lot of qualities with other secret societies. While their fandom is not secret, I would say that there is an interview selection process. There are deep bonds between the members of the organization. I would argue there is the use of secret rites or rituals that solidify the members of the group, and that they are charitable towards members of their organizations as well as others, and that they treat each other as equals. I had felt myself undergo a selection process early on when I first spoke to and met her direct, Jamily. I believe that the concert experience for all PJ fans is a rite or ritual that solidifies members of the group. They are charitable towards themselves and others, more on this shortly, and their membership, at least the lodge, which I belong to, treats everyone with equality. My fandom of Pearl Jam started when I first saw them on October 17, 1991, when they were opening for the Red Hot Chili Peppers at the Duke Ellington Ballroom of the Holmes Student Center at Northern Illinois University in DeKalb, Illinois. I was 2 days shy of my 18th birthday as I started university when I was 17. While I don't remember much of the show due to the passing of time and intoxicating substances I may have consumed, I do remember thinking they were pretty awesome and energetic. Of course, their debut album, 10, would take off shortly after that, launching them into the atmosphere of their Rock and Roll Hall of Fame career success, and would solidify my fandom of the band. I would next see them on August 2, 1992, at the World Music Theater, while they were part of the bill of the second Lollapalooza tour. Unfortunately, I would next see them again live in September of 2022, after 30 years. Regrettably, school, life, a first marriage, and children contributed to the long gap. Luckily, I am making up for lost time. Those of you who are friends on my socials know that I've just finished a 2-week period where I have seen them perform in Indianapolis, technically Noblesville, Wrigley Field in Chicago, and the world-famous Madison Square Garden. At the month's end, I will see them headline 2 of the 3 nights of the Ohana Music Festival in California. All this is being said because I had a recent incident while seeing them live in Indianapolis that tested my character as a man, Mason, and Pearl Jam fan. Much like Freemasonry, some people are Pearl Jam fans that are that in name only. Instead of following the tenets of brotherly love, which have been laid out for fans by Pearl Jam's lead singer Eddie Vedder, which is a zero-tolerance policy for any shenanigans at the concerts. If he sees them, he will stop the show and have those instigating removed. Some fans don't care. Unfortunately, I was the focus of attention for one such overserved fan in Indianapolis. This fan decided he didn't like me much. I can only assume this is because he spilled his beer on my and other fans' chairs, pushed me in the back several times, and I believe spit on me. I'm going to be completely honest. If this had happened when I was in my late teens or 20s, I would have pushed him back and we would have settled the matter with violence. However, I have changed. Because I am a Freemason, I felt that choosing violence would potentially harm the fraternity as well as ruin my wife's concert experience. For this concert, we were separated. While I had a seat in the pavilion, she was in general admission, or the pit, right at the barrier between the stage and the fans. In PJ fan parlance, and probably other fan groups as well, this is known as being on rail. She waited all day for that experience with another member of the Jamily, and someone who was a witness at our wedding. Tracy and I wasn't going to ruin that experience for her. I'm very cognizant of the Masonic ring I wear on the ring finger of my right hand, much like my wedding ring serves as a reminder of my fidelity to the love of my life, my wife Lisa. The Masonic ring serves as a reminder of my responsibilities as a Freemason. So when he pushed me for a second time, I turned toward him. I wanted to have a dialogue with him, but his inability to speak or stand up without assistance from holding on to the chairs in front of him told me that that would be futile. Sometimes you just have to turn back around, which I did. Needless to say, I didn't have the best concert experience, and walking out of that concert, I wasn't sure I would ever see another concert. I was angry, frustrated, and depressed the next day. It brought me back to the very traumatic experience as a child where I felt helpless in a situation where I was the victim of abuse at the hands of someone I trusted. During this time, I was reminded of a member of the Pearl Jam community, one of my wife's close friends who had cystic fibrosis and had survived a double lung transplant only to succumb to COVID-19. His name was Sean Sullivan, or Sully, as Lisa and her friends called him. Sean was known for encouraging his fellow Pearl Jam community to live their lives and to have experiences, often saying, "You gotta buy the ticket, man." Why he said this is most likely because he had confronted the real possibility of mortality through the hardships and challenges he endured. However, those challenges only seem to add to his zest for life. While I don't necessarily know how he might have handled the specific situation in Indianapolis, I do believe that he would have been disappointed if I allowed that one specific fan to ruin the future experiences. Sean's simple statement embodied the idea of memento mori, which, while not implicitly stated in Freemasonry, is an underlying theme of our philosophy. One of the main ideas of Masonic philosophy teaches us that while death is unavoidable and the only certainty of our lives, we must also be industrious with the finite time we have to live. We are taught that in our youth as entered apprentices, we ought to industriously occupy our minds in the attainment of useful knowledge. In manhood, as a fellowcraft, we are encouraged to discharge our respective duties to God, our neighbor, and ourselves, so that in age as Master Masons we may enjoy the happy reflection consequent on a well-spent and die in the hope of a glorious immortality. I also think of Sean's charity as he was heavily involved in championing charitable endeavors for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. He also embodied the emblem of the beehive, living the idea of being industrious and never being contented while our fellow creatures are in want, especially when it is in our power to relieve them without inconvenience to ourselves. I believe that Sean had some role to play in his family getting tickets for Night 2 of the Pearl Jam concert, which took place on August 31st. Their tickets were in section 218, which was Sean's birthday, 218. And Pearl Jam played the song Smile at this show, which was the same song dedicated to him after his passing by Eddie Vedder when he was touring with his band, The Earthlings, a few years ago. While I was never able to meet Sean in this life, I feel honored to know of him. His legacy endures. My challenge to all of you is to live by Sean's words and embrace our Masonic philosophy as dictated by Sean. You gotta buy the ticket. Whether the ticket is for a concert, sporting event, or vacation, live your life. Perhaps if you feel inspired by Sean, as I was, you might also decide, if you can do so without material injury to yourself, to donate to the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation in his honor. My and Sean's friend Kelly Whitlock's fundraising campaign for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation for Sean is here. Inserted here is a hot link which we will put into the show notes for you to find and donate if you so choose. The article continues with a quote from a song of Pearl Jam's, "I miss you already, I miss you always, I miss you already, I miss you all day. This is how I feel. I miss you already, I miss you always. 3 crooked hearts, swirls all around. I miss you all day. Smile. Pearl Jam." Darren A. Laners. A piece from the heart, as what happens a lot of times on the Midnight Freemasons, and of course the Midnight Freemasons, the blog where Master Masons talk about topics of Masonic interest, each of them from their own unique perspective. And certainly here I think perhaps some of us have had tragedies in our lives or people who have inspired us to live to the fullest, and it sounds like Sean was one of those great guys. Again, a link to that cystic fibrosis donation campaign will be in the show notes if you so choose to check that out. And a link back to the original article on the Midnight Freemasons blog will appear in the show notes as well. Our thanks goes out to Brother Darren A. Laners for his continued writing and this great article. The next piece I had for you this week was not planned like this, but I thought, we should probably read this because it's pretty darn interesting. This is an article called 7 Facts About the Earliest Humans on Earth. Now, this is Masonic in that it falls under the 7 liberal arts and sciences and our discussions of those things. In particular, this piece jumped out at me because I usually do something called the Senior Deacon's Lecture, which is like the first 2/3 of the Middle Chamber Lecture if you're in other states, right? And we talk about the first formations of society and those kinds of things. And that's kind of where this one hit for me, and I thought this was just really cool and gave us a really neat rundown of the earliest humans on Earth. Let's check this out. This comes as courtesy from historyfacts.com. We'll put a link right back to the original article for you to check out. And again, please frequent their site as they carry lots of awesome information and great educational articles. 7 Facts About the Earliest Humans on Earth. Recorded human history is just a tiny blip on the temporal radar. The pyramids of Giza were built around 2500 BCE, but 4,500 years ago seems like yesterday when you compare it to the 300,000 years our species, Homo sapiens, has been around. Since our earliest ancestors didn't leave as much behind, we know very little about how they lived. Quote-unquote human, however, is a genus, not a species, and the history of humanity includes much more than sapiens. With new genetic research, we're learning more about our ancestry all the time, but much of what we learn just raises even more questions. How closely related are we to Neanderthals? When did humans start making art? What were our ancestors' day-to-day lives like? Pique your curiosity with these 7 facts about the very earliest humans on Earth. The earliest Homo sapiens were from Africa. Scientists first theorized in the 19th century that humans originated in Africa, and modern genetic science has largely confirmed that to be the case, though researchers are still working to determine the exact geography. Scientists also disagree on when and how humans dispersed. One early theory suggested that our Homo sapiens ancestors started to leave Africa around 60,000 years ago. Most non-African humans today can trace their origins back to a large exodus around that time. But smaller migrations may have started much earlier. Fossil evidence shows that groups of foragers arrived in Asia around 120,000 years ago and brought skills such as deep-sea fishing and cave art with them. Other fossil discoveries, including a 210,000-year-old skull found in Greece, suggest some humans left Africa even earlier. Early human species mated with one another frequently. Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, and Denisovans, the latter of which is an early human species discovered in 2008, share a common ancestor, Homo heidelbergensis. This species also probably came from Africa, but had reached modern-day Israel more than 700,000 years ago. It has been theorized that when one group of Homo heidelbergensis left Africa more than 400,000 years ago, some moved west to Europe and evolved into Neanderthals. Others moved to East Asia and became Denisovans. Those who stayed in Africa evolved into Homo sapiens. When Homo sapiens eventually left Africa, they encountered Neanderthals and Denisovans and started reproducing, and Denisovans and Neanderthals mated with one another too. Those two species are now extinct, but they live on in modern human DNA, which contains a significant amount of both. Most non-Africans are between 1 and 4% Neanderthal, and many people with Southeast Asian and Pacific Island heritage are up to 5% Denisovan. Recent research shows that people of African descent have some Neanderthal DNA too, likely a result of back-and-forth migration. Paleolithic people nurtured their pets. Scientists are still puzzled about when and how humans first befriended dogs, but we know it was a very long time ago. One of the earliest pet puppers lived 14,000 years ago in modern-day Germany, and it wasn't even a working dog, demonstrating a close bond based more on affection than function. In 2018, researchers analyzed a Paleolithic grave that contained 2 humans and 2 dogs. The younger of the 2 dogs was around 27 weeks old, a little over 6 months when it died, and it showed evidence of an illness that suggests it wouldn't have even lived that long without human intervention. Puppies are vulnerable to a serious illness called canine distemper, which is almost always fatal if untreated. The dog in the grave showed a serious case of distemper that developed when it was just 3 or 4 months old, yet it went on to live another 2 to 3 months. The discovery implies a nurturing, loving relationship with dogs that stretches back thousands of years. The Mesolithic people may have taken camping trips. Just as modern humans occasionally like change of scenery, Mesolithic people in Scotland ventured out on short trips, though more likely for hunting purposes than sightseeing and leisure. A campsite uncovered on the Mar Lodge Estate, historic site in Scottish Highlands, seemed designed for one single short-term stay. Archaeologists found evidence of campfires and limited tool-making and believe a very small group of people stayed here, one time for only a day or 2. A similar site was discovered in Nairn, Scotland, about 45 miles away in 2011. Another excavation in the Mar Lodge Estate site found a longer-term Mesolithic settlement, but archaeologists don't think it was used year-round because of harsh winter conditions. Some Neolithic people lived in urban environments. It's easy to imagine early humanoids spreading out or just grabbing the nearest cave. But at least one group of humans from the Neolithic era built pretty close quarters around 9,000 years ago. In Ketelhoyuk, located in central Turkey, early people built mud brick houses up against each other and on top of each other. Researchers believe the site could have as many as 16 layers of homes. Each home had a hearth, oven, and platforms that were likely used for sleeping. The settlement didn't have streets, so people traveled on the roof, which is also where they entered their homes. Residents kept their homes tidy and dumped their trash in small open areas between buildings. Cemeteries were also part of these vertical cities. People buried their dead beneath the floor. Humans have been making art for more than 40,000 years. Southeast Asia is home to some incredibly ancient cave art, including the oldest known figurative drawings, art that depicts a specific form instead of just being abstract. One cave painting in Borneo depicts a 4-legged animal that dates back to at least 40,000 years, but potentially as many as 52,000 years. Scientists suspect it's a banting, a species of cattle that still exists both in captivity and the wild. Another painting from the Indonesian island of Sulawesi, at least 44,000 years old, shows a buffalo being hunted by half-human, half-animal creatures. A cave painting of a Sulawesi warty pig is at least 45,500 years old. Abstract art, meanwhile, goes back even further. Cave art on the Iberian Peninsula in Spain, potentially made by Neanderthals, is at least 64,000 years old. And finally, we're still discovering new human species. In the last 150 years, scientists identified some very early human species. Homo habilis, for instance, discovered in 1960, lived between 2.4 million and 1.4 million years ago. Homo rudolfensis, discovered in 1986, lived between 1.9 million and 1.8 million years ago. And Homo erectus, discovered in 1890, lived between 1.89 million and 110,000 years ago. In more recent years, genetic research has turned up other previously unknown species that we are still learning about. Scientists discovered the Denisovans in 2008 as a separate species based on genetic sequencing of fossils. Other species of ancient humans have only been found in the genome. One human species started breeding with Homo sapiens around 43,000 years ago. Some are much, much older. when Neanderthals and Denisovans first reached Europe and Asia hundreds of thousands of years ago, so-called super-archaics were already there. Neanderthals and Denisovans mated with them and eventually replaced them, just as modern humans would eventually do to the Neanderthals and Denisovans. This article was by Sarah Ann Lloyd, again published on historyfacts.com. I highly suggest heading on over there, checking out the direct links in the show notes to her articles, as well as this one in particular, that should at least kick off some curiosities within us. How old are we? We talk about the history of masonry and the human species, and there's all of these romantic ideas about when masonry first started. People say Noah was the first mason, Adam was the first mason, as it says in that second edition of Anderson's Constitutions, which is kind of funny, but nonetheless, the human origin story is just one of those things that has always been captivating to all of us as humans, thinking about where we came from, what are we here to do, and all of those things. But I think these two articles kind of tie in nicely together, because we're thinking about origins and what we're here to do, and in this case, maybe what we're here to do is to buy the ticket. In any case, I'm glad you bought this ticket to the WCY podcast. I hope you enjoyed this particular episode. One more time, I want to thank our contributors, fellows, legacy partners, and our producers of the show. Without you, we cannot do this show the way we do it. I really appreciate everything and all the shares and all of those things that you guys do to help keep this show afloat. Thank you so much to Masonic Revival. Please check out Masonic Revival for your next Masonic wares purchases. You will not be disappointed. Trust me. And I also want to thank, one more time, the Illinois Lodge of Research for the invitation to come and speak. And until next week, stay on the level. For Whence Came You, I'm Robert Johnson. Take care.
You've been listening to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry with your host, Brother Robert Johnson. Be sure to join us for our next edition.
Media.
Well, you guys beat me as not the